All right, we are live. Oh my goodness. We are live for our last interview of the Radiate event. And I'll be honest, like this is a really great topic to just to close, this whole event with. We'll have it. We're going to have some wrap up tonight and we're going to have a dance party tonight. This topic is really a great one for us to get to really just sink into. So Tara, thank you for being here, making the space on a Saturday. And let's get right into it.
All right.
To get us started, instead of formal bio, because everyone can read that on the speaker's
Mhm.
page, I would love to get to hear from you. What got you into this work?
Well, there's the very beginning that I always wanted to be an educator. Like I would have dreams as a child of being an educator and increasing people's language. So something about vocabulary was really important to me. So I just need to say that. So I kind of bookmark that. And then as I got older, I got my undergraduate degree in literature because I love stories. Right. So I wanted to hear people's stories. And so then I thought I wanted to be an educator, kind of teaching English. And so I did that for a very short time. And when I was teaching Beowulf and Macbeth, I recognized that all this content was in the way of the process of meeting all of these amazing students who had fabulous lives that I wanted to know more about. So then I went to graduate school to become a clinician, to understand more about their stories. And then when I graduated, everybody wanted to talk about sex and they wanted to talk about sexuality and relationships. And I had 0 classes on human sexuality in my graduate studies. So feeling the lack of that, I went back for further studies and became a sexologist and became certified as a sex therapist. So I was really responding to the population. I felt like if they were open and honest and authentic with me, I really needed to meet them in a professional way. And now when I look back, I'm like, of course, I'm listening to people's stories, right? So going kind of beyond the literature, and I'm teaching them really understanding their own vocabulary around claiming their pleasure, around sensuality, and really allowing them to create a common language then with for themselves and for their lovers.
Oh,
So that's where I'm like, oh, all the pieces kind of came together, but not in a way I would have imagined. I didn't dream of being a sex therapist or a sexual empowerment coach.
no. And in general, I just love that, right? Like just sort of following the little bunny trail. Just here I am and going to be in it and present to it. And where's it pulling me to? And where's it pulling me to? I love how it all comes together. Well, before we dive into the specific conversation we get to have today, will you tell us a little bit about sexologist?
Sure.
Is it
So
as obvious as it sounds, or what does that mean?
yeah, I mean, I think any ologist is an expert in that field. So a sexologist is an expert in the field of sex. And that's what the process was for me to become a certified sex therapist. And so it was very stringent. I went through a lot of training. I went through a lot of supervision, especially on the clinical side. So now to be a sexual empowerment coach, I feel like I have a really solid background in speaking about sex and sexuality with a large range of people with various appetites and preferences and experiences, which is so, yeah, inclusive of all humanity, really.
Man, this is such a big and important topic. I'm looking over here because I'm trying to have the feed set up where I can see questions. I'm not sure why it's not coming up. I will stop being distracted by this, but I'm just going to take 1 second to
Yeah,
see.
yeah, I would love engagement. So that would be great to know what people are
Yeah,
wanting to know more about.
let me check and see. I don't know. Like, I'm not usually a Mercury retrograde or, technology person, but something's been going on these last couple of days. The
Oh,
universe
I love it.
universe cannot hold me down. Okay, here I can see it over here, so that should be good enough. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, really big topic. Maybe that's it. It's like the energy of the conversation is already
Truly.
picked up.
Yeah. Woo, it's
Close that.
amplified.
I know, like we're talking about sex.
Yeah.
So really, looking at sex, sexuality, and sensuality, when we're having the anti experience, right? When we're having the experience that we don't want to be having,
Yeah.
how are we usually thinking about these topics? How do we usually think about sensuality?
I'd say for the most part, we're not. That's a true thing. And I hear that again and again. And then in order, yeah, goodness. And then the problem's reinforced when women maybe beginning to think about it, they've gotten that from their partner. And so usually, because I see a lot of heterosexual couples, usually it's the man saying, so something's wrong because we're not having sex. And then the woman's recognizing, well, yeah, because I'm not feeling it, but now maybe I should. And so now it's entering the field. And so then there's this thought that I need to address it for on the woman's part, but yet it's as it's seen as a problem. Like it's not seen as a function of the relationship. Like, well, if that was in the field and it was desirous, then maybe it would be happening. But instead, she feels pathologized and feels like I must be wrong, or I must be broken, or something is going on with me. Because if I was normal, then I would be feeling those sexual urges.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what tends to be going on in that case if it's not on, I'll speak for us as women, if it's not on our minds, right? We're just not even recognizing it's not there until our partner might be like, hey, there's a deficit here. What's going on?
I mean, I think it can vary from woman to woman, but I get the sense for the most part that it's this lack of being embodied, the lack of identifying pleasure as a regular part of their lives, whether it is through other senses other than the erogenous zones, but really the sense of pleasure of what is it like to be in the sunshine? What is it like to walk in the rain? What is it like to eat ice cream and feel the pleasure of that? And so I think oftentimes there's just this void of experience of pleasure in their life. So they're not really claiming it in a way that would make them think in those ways.
I'm getting this sense of like tuned in on the radio dial, right? Like
Yeah.
where, like what am I tuned into? And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
pleasure isn't like a part of the frequency coming in,
Yeah.
not looking for it, not engaging with it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great analogy. I do think that's true. And oftentimes, because it's a lot of static that's going on from all of the other expectations that women have in their lives to take care of the home, or to take care of their work, or to take care of the children, or to take care of the family, or to take care of elders. But something is calling them that is different than their own pleasure. And so they're referencing outside of themselves and taking care of everybody else except
Right.
for themselves.
Right. Which makes so much sense of why it doesn't even register, right?
Correct.
Like if the focus is all out there, that, like
Mhm.
pleasure, dear, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what's the impact of this? Or asked another way, why is pleasure so important? What's the impact
Mm.
if we're not registering on the pleasure meter?
Oh my goodness. I mean, what I see then as a result is that it could be years that a couple can live together like roommates, but not be sexually satisfied. So I say that's kind of the extreme. And then on the lesser levels, it's just this goodness, this ability to please everybody else, but for the woman not to please herself. And then the lack of ability to know what is her desire or what is her pleasure. So when we don't live into that on a regular basis, then we don't know it. And then, goodness, when a lover asks, what is our pleasure? We have this expectation oftentimes that they know, but we don't even know it for ourselves. And so there's such a power that women can claim by being able to know their pleasure, being able to know their desire, being able to know their sensual selves. And that's really powerful because it helps with creation of all sorts, not just babies, but all things that we create and manifest in our lives. And I think that that connection doesn't happen oftentimes when women are struggling with lack of pleasure in their lives.
Okay. What was coming to me was, the connection here around energy. I've really, radiate is all about just boosting our energy naturally. And I
Yeah.
have just brought to the table, like, we need to be focused on some other topics versus just, physical energy, maybe, or getting some caffeine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what I heard you just say is that being being tuned in this way, like tuned into pleasure and clear on what gives us pleasure, is really that element. It's like I think I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the energy for creation.
Yes. It is. It is really the energy for creation, and that we as women, I mean, this is maybe a little bit esoteric, but our divine birthright is that we are able to create, that we create life, which is a mystery and magical, and that we create all things that we want to manifest in this life. And that's so important that we recognize it. It's not, we often think in terms of gestation with our children. And if you've never had a child, you and all women have the power to create. And it is the way that we create our life, the things that we choose to focus our energy on, that we're creating. And when we know our desire, then we're really living into that. And so I'd say for women to know what pleases them is really important, because then it puts them on the path of creating all that they're meant to create in this life.
Okay. Okay. And so for the woman who has been busy giving, like looking outward, taking care of, doing all of the things, right, where pleasure hasn't registered on the radar,
Yeah.
what's a way to start reconnecting with that? How do we start getting clear about what pleases us and what we really want?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a gentle process, that we can't just say that it needs to be done tomorrow, but that's something that we live into. And like any muscle, that it needs to be exercised, and it's a slow process before we get up to, those big biceps. And we need to be gentle with ourselves. And so really just allowing the things that you're already doing that are pleasurable, that you can really feel into. Like I take a bath, and it's like, oh, that can be a very sensual experience if we allow it to be, and not just a perfunctory experience of I need to be clean. But when we ease into things that we're already doing, like eating, and maybe we bless our meal, or we slowly languish our meal, where we're able to taste and savor the food in a very delicious way, then we've elevated that experience of something that can be typically pretty mundane, and maybe not even mm, bringing any awareness to it. So this, it's just a contrast of things that we're already doing. I think it's great to look at those items that we're already doing, because sometimes to add another thing on feels like, oh, I should be doing this. And when it becomes a should, then it's never going to be pleasurable.
Right. Right. And almost the opposite, right? Then it becomes like
Always.
energy draining.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and that's a really big piece about claiming pleasure. It's oftentimes when we don't live in our pleasure that we're feeling a sense of depletion, or we're feeling a sense of disconnection. And oftentimes we want to feel that connection to ourselves and to others in a deep and meaningful way. And we want to feel replenished. And in order to do that, we need to really connect with our desire and with our pleasure. And again, it can be simple, mundane things that we're already doing. So this way we can achieve, if we'd like, the ecstasy of orgasm. But it takes this road, or this is one road to get there. I mean, I'm sure there's many, but this is very sustainable and consistent and practical.
Right. Right. And the word that's like flashing into my mind as you're saying this is receive, like setting ourselves
Yeah,
up for the opportunity to receive. I was
beautiful.
even thinking, I don't know why, maybe you said it, or just thinking of eating a strawberry, right? Like I'm going to eat the strawberry anyway. Why not receive like the
Oh,
pleasure of the juice and the
I love
texture,
it.
the flavor of all of it? And so I hear you saying is like what we're already doing, and we can
Correct.
allow ourselves to receive the pleasure of that experience.
So beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, to receive. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So we can get on this path. We can start, finding the things that give us pleasure, certain tastes, certain experiences, just slowing down, right?
Just slowing down. Yes.
Yeah. Letting a shower be a little bit longer than
Yes.
sitting on that bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. And so then we take it a little bit bigger. The word in the title of our conversation is sensuality. And so, will you tell us a little bit more about, the specifics of sensuality? I have a sense that it's a part of pleasure. And,
Yeah.
and tell us a little bit more about sensuality.
Yeah, so for me, sensuality lives in the body. That, I mean, we are so blessed to be here in the vessel that we live in, and that it is a sacred vessel. And because we have this body, we're able to experience pleasure in a sensual way. We have the five senses for a reason, that we're able to take in information. And part of that information is pleasure, that we can experience pleasure in a very real way because we are in our bodies. And when we're not living fully in our bodies and going through the motions, then we may not experience the pleasure because we're looking for the next thing. We're oftentimes future oriented instead of in the present moment. And the beautiful thing about the body is that the body can only ever be in the present moment. And even when we know so much in our mind, it is only when it lands within the body that it's truly embodied and known and becomes part of our habits, which then creates our lifestyle, which then creates our life. So all of those things are really important. So the body is this, again, this beautiful vehicle that we're able to experience life in. And the senses are, goodness, an opportunity to explore the world, that we have this sensual experience is really potent, and it gives us so much richness and variety and flavor to, yeah, to the world that we live in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about really identifying first what through our senses, what gives us pleasure, what we like, what we desire. And then as we move forward kind of along the scale, if we're in relationship and we're desiring to improve our intimacy and maybe sexual intimacy with our partners, what are some of the next steps if we've been in that place of, not on the radar, but
Yeah.
want to start somewhere? What are some of the first steps there?
Well, I mean, I think the reason why I like for women to start with themselves is because then they know more data points about what's pleasurable to themselves. Oftentimes, because we don't, well, most of us have not grown up in a sex positive culture. We often don't have fluency or comfort in speaking about sex and sexuality. We often don't even have appropriate vocabulary to talk about our genitalia or our erogenous zones or what we experience as pleasure for ourselves. And yet we have then the expectation that our lover knows. And if we've not shared that with our lover, how would they really know? And because we're dynamic beings, we're always changing and evolving. And one thing that pleased us yesterday may not be the same today. There may be some pieces of consistency, but we're dynamic beings. And so being able to really identify that, and I would say then to articulate that with our lover, is a powerful process. And so we get to create that catalog of ourselves, and then we get to offer that up to our lover, and they get to read kind of the instruction manual of who we are and how we show up. And I mean, that's a really big process, and one that I'd say a lot of people get stuck in. I mean, it's great to have a therapist or a coach who can help guide that conversation. I think oftentimes we have a lot of baggage if we've been married for a long time, and we get defensive of like, I've done that, I've tried that, that didn't work. And can we do that in a loving way and be gentle with ourselves, and then be gentle and loving with our beloved?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's what was coming up for me is how to have these conversations, right? So once we get more clear and we want to communicate, kind of hand over the manual to what pleases us, how do we do that in a way where it's not like we're the the school marm, like this is how you should be doing, this is
Yes.
what you need to do. How do we do it in a loving way?
Oh my goodness. It's a tricky thing, again, because of the baggage that so many of us have in relationship with our beloved. But what I know is that oftentimes it's great to have these conversations when you're actually not in a sexual interaction, when it's apart from the sexual experience, because then there's more clarity. There's less charge for each person, and they're not going to feel personally attacked and annihilated and defensive, like I did something wrong. Because when we're in a sexual experience, for most people, they're pretty vulnerable and they're feeling pretty sensitive. And so I would say to begin those conversations outside of those interactions, outside of the bedroom, to begin to explore what's true for you and to begin with like something loving and positive. What I really like is, or what really turns me on is, or when you touch me here, I feel, or the sexiest thing about you is, I mean, there's all these stems that I use in my work that really help facilitate the conversation, because sometimes we need those prompts so they're not charged with indictments. And yeah, and because that's ultimately, that's not where we want to go. I know we want to go towards more love.
Right.
And we just sometimes just don't know how to get there.
Right, right. And so, what is the power of this? We really talked about tapping into pleasure individually, and
Mhm.
as the source of energy and creation.
Yeah.
Um, what is the power of this in relationship? Why is it so important? Because I know when I talk with women who feel like there's a deficit of sexual intimacy, they're aware of it and sort of
Yeah.
aware of like, I want it to be better. I have a lot of baggage. I have a lot of resistance,
Yes.
and I know I want it to be better. And so, um, I think sometimes it can be really helpful for our brains just to have that context, right? Of like, why
Mhm.
would I even work towards this? Why would I put in
Mm,
the time and energy? Like,
mm.
what's the payoff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think it's really an opportunity to evaluate, like, what is it that you want in your life? Um, if you really want a partnership, then how are you showing up as a partner? If you want to be single, then maybe it's a different desire and how you want to show up. But I think that's really the ultimate goal, because if we're choosing to be in a relationship with our beloved and we're choosing to be in a partnership, then we need to show up as a partner, and that there is the we that we're creating. And I think that what I see is a lot of couples who are living together as roommates and feeling quite disconnected and wanting to have that love and wanting to have that spark, and they just don't know how. And they know that they can grin and bear it and that it's good enough because they are happy with other facets of their life. The bills are paid, the house is paid for, they got a good flow with their family, the kids are taken care of, whatever it is. And so if I really claim that I want to be sexual with my partner as well, then I might really be rocking the boat, because then that would take some work, and then it would take some self-reflection about how you're showing up. And I think sometimes people just don't want to go there because, again, sex is very vulnerable and it's very raw. And I also know that sometimes we just don't know. And there's certain tools and techniques that will help make things more pleasurable. But to get out of our comfort zone of what we habitually do may make us feel uncomfortable. And so we'll have to learn things. And when we learn things, we're not always graceful, and we might be a little bit awkward, and it might be really uncomfortable. And when we're not feeling comfortable with our partner already, to be that vulnerable and to feel like, goodness, I feel so incompetent, is a hard place to be. And I think that willingness to go there, even a little bit, transforms relationships, because then the partner knows that you're really trying and that you're really showing up and that you're really putting in the effort and being vulnerable. I mean, and I think even if you don't get it right, the fact that you've put the effort in is, oh my goodness, is exponentially so powerful and healing. And I know more people want this. And so they think if they get a divorce and they go outside of the relationship, that it'll be better. And the reality is that we're always going to create the same relationship in a different form if we haven't learned the lesson. So whether it's this partner or the next partner, the lesson's still the same because we haven't mastered what it is that we need to learn from it. It'll just come back.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. The words that are in my mind you keep saying. I was thinking vulnerability, like it really is vulnerable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What's striking me is that all healing, right? All growth,
Yeah,
all truly stepping into and claiming our power, all of those things require our vulnerability,
truly.
right?
Yeah, and we try to bypass it and think we could do it another way, and we can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is actually a gift, right? Like vulnerability for ourselves, practicing that, but also being vulnerable with our partners is potentially, it could be clunky at first, right? But it's potentially one of the greatest gifts we can give each other is to be truly vulnerable with each other.
Yes, it creates such intimacy.
Yeah. And what's hitting me is that because we talked about the individual first, knowing our pleasure being the source of creation, really generative energy, maybe
Yes.
sometimes of like things we can't even predict, like becoming a
Yes.
sexologist, right? It's just making me think in relationship how when we do this work together, it's the source of creation of something in our relationship that we couldn't even predict.
I believe that to be true.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so what have you seen? What is some of the results? What happens for couples when they dive in this way?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that hmm, the connection and the bond between the two grows to a level that they hadn't even imagined would be possible. Um, that yeah, I think oftentimes couples feel spurred on by the remembrance of how things were sexually and sometimes just wanting to get back to that, but we can never really get back to where we are because we're always evolving and growing. And so what they find is, especially when they've put in the time together, that there's a quality of intimacy and depth and emotional bond that goes far beyond their wildest dreams, really, that they feel so connected with the other. um, yeah, that there is, I would say, profound healing for everybody involved, and that their strength of relationship really has grown. I mean, and I have to say that in this work, um, it is few and far between because I'd find that most couples are not as courageous to go through the fire and do this work because it's really hard.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So when we are doing the work, are there some commonalities? I know in general, you've already said, pleasure can be so individual. And when it comes right down to sex, what is it that men are wanting? What is it women are wanting? What is it that kind of gets in the way of sex working well? And here, that's like four questions all at once. And what
Yeah.
happens to be better?
Yeah. Yes. Better. Good answer. Yes. Um, hmm. So, in general, and I'll just speak to heterosexual couples because that's mostly what my experience has been. And what I find is that women want the emotional connection. And again, these are generalizations, but oftentimes women want the emotional connection, and men want the sexual connection so they can have the emotional connection, and women want the emotional connection and then the sexual connection. So it's like that. And that men are often much more physically stimulated and women need, um, yeah, so they're more rapid to get to excitement, to get to arousal, to achieve orgasm, to ejaculate. And I'd say oftentimes without education or without experience, men's trajectory of the sexual expression is very linear. And so they see things ending in kind of that progression. So stimulation, orgasm, ejaculation, done. That's the sentence. And that for women it's different, and that sometimes arousal happens, and then sometimes there's the desire, and sometimes it's a desire first and then the arousal, which is the physiological response, but it doesn't always go in order, that we're much more circular. And so I would say, well, that it takes a lot for a woman to get aroused. And so some people might say foreplay is essential, but I'd say that really that doesn't even feel right, because it's like foreplay is sometimes all that there is, and because it needs to be this extended sexual connection that women sometimes need 20, 30 on average minutes of stimulation, of feeling the connection with their partner before they're even aroused, whereas men can come to orgasm in 6 or 7 minutes. So after intercourse, and intercourse sometimes is a complete expression, but it doesn't always have to be. I like to think of sex as a menu, that there's many different things that you can choose on it, and that sometimes you don't even go for the meal. You're just there for a dessert and, an appetizer, and you may just have it in that order, that there's many variations. So I think the exploration and expansion of sex is really important. And I think part of that happens when we begin to dismantle what it is that we've learned, because pornography plays a huge piece in a lot of people's education, but particularly men. And that is misinformation. And it's not realistic. And it doesn't work oftentimes with real people. And so there's elements that need to be deconstructed. And then we need to be able to figure out what's real. And then how do we please ourselves? And how do we please our partners? And be willing to be goofy and messy and playful and creative, because we don't know oftentimes, because we haven't been given that instruction, and yet we have the expectation that I should be doing it right. And oftentimes we really just don't know. And even if we have an experience or many experiences that this is the way, um, this new partner, our new lover, our new beloved, may be absolutely different. And so then we have to relearn the process, and we need to be willing to be creative and imaginative. And even if we've been together with a partner for decades, that may be the case as well. Maybe they've gone through a pregnancy. Maybe they've gone through menopause. Maybe there has been some other change in their life. Um, or maybe it's just all the years together and wanting to try something new. So I'd say the best things that we can bring, again, are laughter and imagination and creativity, because there needs to be some levity in the process. It can't always be so serious.
Right. Right. I love that. Just the invitation to committing to being messy, getting it wrong,
Yeah, messy. Yeah.
being vulnerable, and a willingness to play in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah. I had a question I really wanted to get to ask you, but
It'll come.
I got lost in the messy and the playfulness.
Oh, I love it. That's a good place to get lost.
That's a good place to get lost. Absolutely. Absolutely. So women get started, right? Women can get started with identifying their own pleasure,
Great.
right?
Yes.
Being just clear in what feels good. What do I desire? What do I like? What feels
Yeah.
like it energizes and makes me feel good? And then being able to transition this into a partnership and being able to express. And this is what I was going to say is
Oh,
that
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
what I'm hearing so much entangled. I want to check this out with you because what I'm hearing sort of wrapped in this conversation is all about the need, the invitation, um, the the opportunity for us to practice using our voice.
Huge, huge, huge. Thank you for naming that. That's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge as a health practitioner. It's huge where I've never thought about it this way.
Yeah.
Definitely thought about sex, sexual intimacy is really important for our health, but I've never actually made this connection before.
Yeah.
Um, because we talk so much, the women that I tend to work with feel like they're having all sorts of adrenal and thyroid problems, right? Our energy
Yes.
is tanked. And
Yes.
yes, when we think about thyroid as you're pointing at
Yep.
your throat, right? We so often correlate that with our expression and holding our voice back, which we'll talk about in terms of speak your truth, get out there, be seen, be heard. And we have this huge deficit in our partnership of expressing what it is that we really want, what it is that we really need.
The toughest, the toughest. So to speak out publicly what it is that you claim or desire, or what is wrong, or what doesn't work for you, and especially sometimes in an angry way, as has been expressed publicly by some women in the Me Too movement. It's like there's a lot of power in that, and it's like, wow. But to say that to your partner in a very intimate way, oftentimes I find the words get stuck here and the expression doesn't go through. I mean, and the work that I do with women is really looking at the energy centers and bringing the energy from the sacral chakra all the way through up to the throat chakra. I mean, ideally out through the crown, but moving that energy is going to bring you more pleasure. It's going to bring you more excitement. It's going to bring you to higher levels of arousal, because that is oftentimes there's a blockage and we're not able to express what it is that we need to express. Sound, movement helps with all of that. I mean, those are tantric practices, but to be able to start with the small steps of saying, this brings me pleasure, or when you do this, I love that, or do more of this, or just, or yum. Like those are great communicating words. And we oftentimes just don't do that enough. And then we have the expectation that our partner understands something that we've not even expressed to them. And there's so much pain in that interaction because the woman has not been able to use her voice and the partner has not been able to hear. And there's just this blockage and this stuckness. And to be able to move that energy creates so much healing.
It gives me chills just from my head all down right out my fingers. Just,
Mm-hmm.
in the world of natural thinking, the power that we have to really
Yes.
transform our health and our relationship with our body
Yes.
in such a tender and intimate way. Yet,
Mm-hmm.
for most of us, in exactly the ways we desire anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Somebody was saying that the sound of our voice creates a vibration that heals us. And I love that. I mean, I don't know, I've not experimented enough with it, but I love that. And I know that when women make more sound, when they're experiencing pleasure, that there is a lot of healing that happens. And that the louder, I would say, the better, the more expressive. And whether it is pleasure with eating, like yum, or it is pleasure as you're pleasuring yourself in a sexual way. And when you're experiencing pleasure with a partner. And oftentimes, especially because we learn sex in such a convoluted way in this culture. And if we are sexually active as teenagers, it's like, okay, we got to be surreptitious about it. We got to conceal. And so the expression is oftentimes muted because we can't live out loud because we're being so shut down sexually as we're learning about sex. And so that trajectory continues for a lot of us. It's like, how do I all of a sudden just be expressive when all these years I was having sex in my parents' house and I had to be quiet, or they needed to not be there, or, and then we have children and then it's like, okay, we need to be quiet, or just all of these concerns for other people that usurp our power to be expressive when we're experiencing pleasure.
Mm, such a big deal.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on this wavelength with this energy that you're brewing here with me, uh, I want to wrap us up here with your vision. What you believe is possible for women.
I love that. So my vision, my ultimate vision is, well, there's my personal one, which is to create intergenerational communities for women where they listen, know, and love their bodies so that they can be so much more powerful and expressive, and to do that through dance, music, and ceremony. That's my big vision, because I know that when women are much more empowered and claiming their pleasure and claiming their desire, that their lives transform, and that then the whole world will ultimately transform. And that it takes the beginning of us as women to claim ourselves as valuable and as priority in order for that shift to happen. And until we prioritize our own selves, that won't happen. So that's what I would love to see as a vision, is every woman claiming herself first, that she is beautiful, that she is adored, that she is desired, and that she's powerful.
Thank you. I feel that deeply.
Yeah.
All right, to finish this up here, will you do a little cheer with me? We just say, ready, set, radiate. Can you do that with me?
I love it.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Ready,
Ready,
set,
set,
radiate.
radiate.